It started as a quiet afternoon at the park. Families were enjoying picnics, kids laughed on the playground, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. But then the rumble of motorcycles shattered the peace. A group of rowdy bikers pulled in, their loud engines and aggressive behavior turning heads and sparking unease among the parkours. They seemed to thrive on the attention, their cocky attitudes intimidating anyone who dared to look their way too long. What they didn't expect was the calm, steady presence of one man sitting alone on a bench nearby. A veteran, his quiet demeanor masked years of experience and strength. When the bikers decided to target him for their antics, they had no idea they'd just picked the wrong person to mess with. What happened next left everyone stunned. The veteran, dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, barely looked up as the bikers circled him, their laughter echoing through the park. He seemed unfazed, his focus fixed on the open book in his hands. It wasn't the reaction they were expecting, and it only fueled their desire to provoke him further. One of the bikers, the loudest and most brash of the group, walked up, towering over the seated man. "You lost, old man," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. The veteran finally looked up, his calm eyes meeting the biker's glare. But instead of responding, he simply closed his book and set it aside. His movements were deliberate, controlled. The bikers exchanged glances, unsure if this was confidence or foolishness. Little did they know, they were about to find out, one way or another. The leader of the bikers smirked, crossing his arms as his crew gathered around, forming a loose circle. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue," he taunted. The veteran stayed silent, his eyes scanning each member of the group. His expression wasn't fear or anger. It was something else entirely, a calm that made the bikers uneasy, though none would admit it. A woman nearby whispered to her husband, "Should we call someone?" But the man shook his head, watching the scene unfold. It wasn't clear why, but something about the veteran's demeanor suggested he didn't need help. One biker grew impatient and stepped forward, knocking the veteran's book to the ground. The man's jaw tightened, but he remained seated. The tension in the air was palpable, like the quiet before a storm. The park had grown eerily silent as everyone watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The veteran slowly leaned forward, picking up his book without a word. The air felt heavy, every eye in the park glued to the scene. The leader of the bikers laughed, but it sounded forced, a little too loud. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Afraid to stand up for yourself?" he jeered, his voice cutting through the silence. The veteran finally stood, his movements measured and deliberate. He wasn't tall, and his frame didn't seem imposing, but something about the way he carried himself made the bikers take a small, unconscious step back. His gaze locked onto the leader, unflinching and steady. "You've had your fun," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Now it's time to leave." The leader scoffed, trying to regain control. "Or what?" he challenged, stepping closer. But the tension in the veteran's posture signaled that something was about to give, and everyone braced for what was coming next. The leader of the bikers took another step forward, his confidence bolstered by the chuckles of his crew. But before he could say another word, the veteran raised his hand, not in fear, but in a silent gesture that made the leader stop mid-step. "Careful," the veteran said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that silenced even the bikers. "You don't know who you're messing with." The bikers laughed nervously, but the leader pushed on. "And who exactly are you?" He sneered, his bravado masking a flicker of doubt. The veteran didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small weathered badge, holding it up just enough for the leader to see. The leader's smirk faltered as his eyes scanned the badge. It wasn't just any badge, it was military, and it bore insignias that spoke volumes. The other bikers leaned in, suddenly unsure of their footing. The veteran slipped the badge back into his pocket, his calm expression unchanged. "Let's just say I've dealt with tougher groups than yours," he said, his voice low but commanding. For a moment, the leader stood frozen, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut. But instead of backing down, he clenched his fists, his pride now tangled with fear. The park grew quieter still, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see how this standoff would end. The leader took one last, defiant step forward, his pride outweighing his caution. But as he moved closer, the veteran shifted his stance, subtle, but enough to make the group pause. "You don't want to do this," the veteran said, his tone steady, almost a warning. The leader hesitated, but his ego wouldn't let him back down in front of his crew. He swung a fist, aiming to end the standoff his way. In an instant, the veteran reacted. With precision and speed that stunned everyone watching, he sidestepped the punch, twisting the leader's arm in a controlled hold. The move wasn't aggressive. It was deliberate, meant to neutralize rather than harm. The leader dropped to his knees with a grunt, his bravado crumbling as the veteran held firm. The bikers froze, unsure whether to intervene. But before they could decide, the veteran released the leader and stepped back, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Walk away," he said firmly, locking eyes with the rest of the group. "Now." The leader scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with humiliation. "Let's go," he muttered, avoiding the veteran's gaze. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances before following, their loud engines a stark contrast to their subdued retreat. As they rode off, the veteran returned to his bench, picking up his book as if nothing had happened. But just as the tension seemed to dissipate, a man in the crowd approached him cautiously. "That was impressive," he said. "Where did you learn to handle yourself like that?" The veteran smiled faintly, his eyes still on his book. "Let's just say, some lessons stick with you." Then, without another word, he turned the page, leaving the park to its peaceful quiet once more. As the park returned to its calm rhythm, whispers of what had just unfolded spread among the onlookers. Families resumed their picnics, and kids began playing again. But the veteran remained a quiet presence on the bench, his book balanced in his hands. A few people glanced his way, some offering nods of respect, but he didn't seem to notice. His focus was elsewhere, as if the confrontation had been nothing more than a fleeting moment in his day. One child tugged at her mother's sleeve and asked, "Who was that man?" The mother smiled softly. "Someone who knows how to stand up for himself without looking for trouble," she replied. The veteran closed his book and stood, taking in the peaceful scene around him before walking away. His quiet strength left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed it.